5. We have present in the meeting Councillors Allison, Convery, Dewar, Ferguson Miller, Johnson Dempsey, Leslie MacDonald, Nelson, Ray, Scott. We have apologies from Councillor Shearer and Councillor Horner's substitution, and I'll hand back to the Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Moving to today's agenda items then. Agenda item number 1 is any declarations of interest. If you can please indicate now. There is no declarations of interest. Agenda item number 2 is the minutes of the previous meeting. These are on pages 5 to 8. I will move these as a true and accurate record.
I'll second it. Thank
you. We'll move on then to agenda item number 3. Is the review of case in respect of planning application P24-1301 for the erection of temporary accommodation, installation of storage container and associated works retrospective at land 50 metres north of 1 North Hill View, Waterfoot Road, Thornton Hall. And these on pages 9 to 82. The item before us today is a notice of review from Planning Services UK on behalf of Mr Jai G. Gaffney. The applicant is asking the PLRB to refuse the planning officer's determination to refuse an application for the erection of temporary accommodation, installation of storage container and associated works retrospective on land at Waterfoot Road and Thornton Hall. Details of the proposals, the officer's report of handling and the information submitted by the applicant are provided in the papers that have been distributed to members. And I said these on pages 9 to 82. The first point then for the PLRB to consider and decide is how we proceed with this review. The applicant has indicated that they consider the review can be determined on the basis of the information provided by them and other parties without any further procedures. Taking account of what is in the papers, we have to decide whether they in fact contain sufficient information for us to determine the review, or if we need more written information, a hearing or a visit to the site. I do think all the information we have, plus the detailed photographs of the site, provide us with all we need to consider this review. Do the members therefore agree that we can proceed without a site visit, hearing or additional information?
Agreed.
Agreed. Anyone otherwise minded? We will then proceed to the review, and I will now open the review for any comments or considerations. Will you please indicate now? Any questions? Okay, can I summarise the points that have been made? The application is for the erection of temporary accommodation, installation of storage container and associated works retrospective on land at Waterfoot Road and Thornton Hall. If we consider that there is no valid policy justification to support the proposals at this occasion and it would not accord with the development plan, planning permission can be refused for the reasons set out in the decision notice issued on the 24th of January 2025. Or if we consider that there is adequate justification for the erection of temporary accommodation, installation of storage container and associated works retrospective on land at this location, we could grant planning permission subject to conditions. Are members minded to uphold the officer's decision to refuse planning permission? If so, I will move. Anyone else otherwise minded? Okay, I will move that we uphold the officer's decision.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Therefore, the decision of this PLRB is to refuse planning permissions for the reasons set out in the decision notice issued on the 24th of January 2025. The next stage is that a written decision notice will be issued by the PLRB, and this should be issued within 28 days. We will then move on to agenda item number 4. The item before us today is a notice of review from Derek Scott, planning on behalf of Mr James Orr of the firm of Thomas Orr. The applicant is asking the PLRB to review the planning officer's determination to refuse an application made under section 42 of the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act 1997 to delete condition number 3 of the planning consent P211210. The said condition restricts occupation of a dwelling house approved under that consent to a person solely or mainly employed in agricultural or a dependent of such a person. It relates to land south east of Cobo Haw Farm Cottage, Cobo Haw Road and Lanark. Details of the proposals, the officer's report of handling and the information submitted by the applicant are provided in the papers, and these are on pages 83 to 352. I'm going to ask Tony Finn, the planning advisor, just to address the PLRB on a planning matter. Tony?
Yep, thank you, Chair. So, as Councillor Nelson has detailed, this review involves the refusal of an application made to delete a condition that was added to a planning permission for a dwelling house at the site that restricts the occupancy of the property. Since the refusal of the application, the Council has received a decision letter from the Scottish Ministers, which was dated the 22nd of April 2025. And this relates to a planning appeal that was made to them following the refusal of a similar application in relation to a house at a site known as Crossbank Livery Centre, at Blair Road in Crossford. The reporter appointed by the Scottish Ministers to determine that appeal allowed it and deleted the condition. So it's considered that this decision is a material consideration for the PLRB to take into account when reviewing the case before them. It's therefore recommended that the item be continued to allow the decision letter from the reporter to be brought before the PLRB. And the procedure to be undertaken in this case would be by way of written submissions. And this will allow the applicant, the interested party, and also the planning officer to provide further representations in terms of any implications the reporter's decision might have on this review. I'll pass back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Tony. I'll just continue for the moment and then we'll touch back on your point there. So the first point then for the PLRB to consider and decide is how we proceed with the review. The applicant has indicated that they consider the review can be determined on the basis of information provided by them and other parties and without any further procedures. However, on the basis of the information now available regarding the reporter's decision relating to a similar condition, I will formally move that a further procedure is undertaken by way of written submissions and that the applicant, interested party and planning and regulatory services are provided with a copy of the reporter's decision notice relating to Crossbank Livery Centre, Blair Road, Crossford, and are requested to provide further representations in terms of any implications that the reporter's decision might have in this review. I would further propose that the parties are given 14 days from the time of notification to respond. Can we agree?
Agreed.
Agreed. Anyone otherwise minded? Councillor Alec Allison, please.
Oh. Thanks, Chair. I'm not sure that we even need to wait on this. The condition that was put on this planning application for many years now has deemed not to be, I don't know what words you want to use, I'll use satisfactory, because no company will give you a mortgage if it has a residential condition in place. And I am fairly certain the legislation was changed a significant number of years ago, and that's why the likes of the Crossford one, and there will be others that have not been upheld. Quite simply, I think we remove that condition just now, because the committee has said it's appropriate to have a house there, and to put a condition on that makes it impossible, I think it's right that it should be removed. So I would move that we remove that condition.
Thank you, Councillor Allison. At this stage then we would need to open the review for discussion. So are you formally moving? I've moved that we take Tony's comment, seconded by Jerry. You're now asking for we open the review, and then that's where you would come in with your movement of deleting that condition. So you're formally moving that we move to the review?
Agreed.
Agreed. I just need somebody to second Councillor Allison that we remove, so that we move to the review and open for discussion. Councillor Graham Scott.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad to second the motion being put by Councillor Allison.
Okay, myself and the Vice Chair are happy to open this as a review as well, so we won't take it to the review. A vote, sorry, we will then just open up the review for discussion. So, okay, hang on just a wee second. Thank you. So I'll just summarise the points made then. The applicant is asking the PLRB to review the planning officer's determination to refuse an application made under Section 42 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1997 to delete condition number 3 of the planning consent P211210. The said condition restricts occupation of a dwelling house approved under that consent to a person solely or mainly employed in agricultural or a dependent of such a person. It relates to land south east of Cobo Hall Farm Road, Cottage, Cobo Hall Road, Lanark. If we consider that there is no valid policy justification to support the deletion of the condition and would not accord with the development plan, planning permission can be refused for the reasons set out in the decision notice issued on the 29th of January. Or, if we consider that there is adequate justification for the deletion of the condition, we could grant planning permission subject to conditions. I will now ask for any decisions and the reasons behind those decisions. Councillor Allison.
Do I need to repeat what I said earlier, Chair?
Yes, please, if you could. Thank you.
If I can remember. The committee has already approved this application that it's suitable for a house to be built there. What this condition does mean, or what this condition means, is that anyone wishing to build a house there cannot get a mortgage. No mortgage condition company that I'm aware of will approve a mortgage if it has a section, if it has this condition on it. And therefore, as we've already said, it's suitable to build there. The legislation, I think, was changed a number of years ago so that this doesn't happen. Hence, the report you had from Tony, I believe. So I'm therefore moving that, or for these reasons, moving that we just drop this condition.
Thank you, Councillor Allison. And just to check then, do you have a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. I'll gladly second the amendment by Councillor Allison.
Can I ask then, is anyone otherwise minded? Are we happy to go with the recommendation from Councillor Allison, seconded by Councillor Scott, that the condition 3 is deleted? Any further comments or questions? Councillor Norman Ray, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to clarify. Are we saying that it is now never appropriate to impose a condition of this sort, or is it particular to this application in some way? I'm a wee bit confused.
I'll ask Tony just to come in, but just for clarity, every plan and application is taken on its own merits, so you have to treat every plan and application as it sees in front of you and the paperwork that's provided to us. However, I'll ask Tony from his expert opinion, his take on it. Tony?
Yep, thank you, Chair. And first of all, you're quite right that every application is determined on its merits. The reference Councillor Allison made to a change of legislation wasn't quite that, so it was guidance in the form of a letter from the Scottish Government's Chief Planner several years ago that highlighted the issues that Councillor Allison had mentioned about the difficulty in terms of getting a mortgage for a house of this type, where there's a restriction on the occupancy. So that's not reflected in the current development plan. But it is reflected, as I say, in the guidance that the Chief Planner provided several years ago. So you can't say that's going to apply in every case, but in this particular case, it certainly is relevant to the decision-making process.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Allison?
Yeah, just thanks, Tony, for clarifying that. I wasn't exactly sure the wording to use, so thanks for the clarification.
Thank you. Is there no further questions? Okay, the decision then is to grant planning permission. I will ask the clerk to issue the draft condition as previously agreed under planning consent P211210 with condition 3 deleted. However, members are not able to amend the other conditions as previously agreed. I'll be happy to move that these are sent out, and we are happy to move that condition 3 is deleted. Agreed? Thank you. Therefore, the decision of the PLRB is to grant plan permission subject to the agreed conditions. The next stage is that this written decision notice will be issued by the PLRB, and this should be issued within 28 days. Thank you. We'll then move on to agenda item number 5, please. The item before us today is a notice of review from Catherine Lyon on behalf of Mr Kevin Brown. The applicant is asking the PLRB to refuse application P241443 for the siting of a touring caravan and pod retrospective for a temporary period during the construction phase of a dwelling house subject of earlier planning permissions. The review relates to land at Spittal Farm, Spittal Road in Carnwath. In this case, the review has been requested because of the failure of the planning officer to make a decision on the application within the statutory time period. As a result, this constitutes a deemed refusal of the application. Details of the proposals and the information submitted by the applicant and an interested party are provided in the papers that have been distributed, and these are on pages 353 to 402. In addition, a statement of observation has been provided by the planning officer, which can be seen on pages 391 to 401. This comprises a report of handling that concludes the proposed development complies with the development plan and that planning permission should be granted. The first point for the PLRB to consider and decide is how we proceed with the review. The applicant has indicated that they consider the review can be determined on the basis of the information provided by them and other parties without any further procedures. Taking account of what is in the papers, we have to decide whether they do in fact contain sufficient information for us to determine the review today, or if we need more information, a hearing or a visit to the site. I do think we have all the information, plus the detailed photographs, and that provides us with all we need to consider this review. Do members then agree that we can proceed without a site visit, hearing or additional information? Agreed. Agreed, thank you. All agreed. We will then proceed to the review, and I will now open the review for discussion or comments. Councillor Alec Allison.
Another local one, Chair. I'm unsure just where to go with this one. Because if they're requiring the accommodation till they get their house built, which they've got planning permission for, it's one thing. How long can we limit the amount of time that they have this temporary application for to allow them to construct their house? I've no idea what the issues are here with them, because they have had planning for some time. Could we limit them at all, or is it a straight yes or no?
Thanks, Councillor. I think just to speak on this one before I ask Tony to come in, the officers were for granting the permission. The applicant decided to, because of the time frame, then push it to PLRB for us to decide, but the officers were deciding it anyway as granting. But I'll ask Tony in just that other point as a straight yes or no. Tony?
Yep, thank you, Chair. So, as Councillor Nelson mentioned in his introduction to this item, a report of handling had been prepared by the planning officer. In this particular case, it does form part of the papers. They're found in Appendix 5 of this item. And you see that one of the recommended conditions on the report of handling is to restrict the temporary accommodation for 1 year only. So, yes, we can restrict it, and the recommendation is from the officer was to restrict it just to 1 year.
Thank you. Councillor Allison, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, thanks. Sorry, I'd missed that bit.
No problem. Okay. Any further questions or comments then? If not, I will summarise. The application then is for the siting of a touring caravan and pod that's retrospective for a temporary period during the construction phase of a dwelling house subject of earlier planning permissions at the application site. If we consider that there is adequate justification for the siting of a touring caravan and pod retrospective for a temporary period during the construction phase of a dwelling house subject of earlier planning permissions at the application site, we could grant planning permission subject to the conditions detailed in the report of handling on page 400 of the papers. Or if we consider that there is no valid policy justification to support the proposals at this occasion and it would not accord with policy 14 of MPF 4 and policies 5 and GBRA 1 if adopted, South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan 2, planning permission can be refused. I will invite for any decisions or reasons. If there are no decisions or reasons, I am happy to move and grant.
I'll second it.
Are we all agreed? Is anyone otherwise minded? Please indicate now. Therefore, the decision of this PLRB is to grant planning permission subject to the agreed conditions. The next stage is that a written decision notice will be issued by the PLRB and this should be issued within 28 days. Agenda item number 6. I don't have any items of urgent business. I will now ask the clerk to stop recording of the meeting and wish you all an enjoyable sunny day. Thank you.